this particular interview will focus almost exclusively on cricket. This is, after all, a sports program, and Martin Crowe is one of the greatest ever cricketers. Other reviewers, I'm sure, will focus on his recovery from cancer, the love story with Lorraine, Marty's depressions, his work life at Sky TV, and the constant scraps he's had in the media world. For me, this interview is about cricket and why a man who played something that I love so brilliantly says he wants nothing more to do with it. Why do you want nothing more to do with something that you have loved even more passionately than I love cricket?
I'm addicted to the game and always have been. I'm grateful for my father's love for the game and my brother's guidance as well from an early age, and I'm grateful for the memories and the ride up the mountaintop and the look around and even the hard falls, because it made the journey memorable. But I realised at Christmas time, Murray, that I was incredibly sick. I was, if I'd carried on another month feeling and thinking the way I did, which was pure anger, I would have killed myself. Tumour was growing at a rapid rate of knots over the Ross Taylor affair. And we know that because there was no tumour there on November the 29th. But by December the 29th, I was in hospital. So, and I had to go into chemotherapy very, very quickly. So I came out of that and went through chemo, and every day for 130 days, I had to try and find the answers as to how I was going to carry on this love affair and enjoy my life and not go through this again. And I knew that I was a cricket alcoholic, and I could never drink from that cricketing well ever again. And maybe I should specify from the New Zealand side of it. I mean, I will look at the game, I'm sure, in the news and what have you, but I won't analyse the game anymore. And this hour is really appropriate because you were one of the first people to ever see me play the game. And you've always stood by me. We've had our moments. You've had brushes with my alter ego, but you've always stood by me. And so it's great that we can, have this moment of talking about batting.
I saw you at 10 in front of the Cornwall Park pavilion, and Faulkner Bush, who was an old rogue, basically, came out to me and said to me, "Deaker, come here and look at somebody who will play lots of games for New Zealand." And you were a standout. There were some good cricketers around Cornwall at that time. The Sims boys, Bremner, Steve Bremner was... And so there were a lot of players there, but you stood out and you loved it. Was it the family start that got you going, the fact that Dave had been a very good cricketer, that Jeff was an older brother who was outstanding at the game? Do you think that got you off to a terrific start?
Yeah, no question. I think there was a moment, I was 5, Jeff was 9, Dad was looking after a team, I think locally around Titirangi area, and we arrived to watch Jeff play, and I'm on the sideline. There's only 10 players that have turned up, so I'm drafted in as number 11, and I get out to bat, but the pads are too big. I do hit the ball through mid-wicket in what would have been a single for my first run of my life, but I can't move. The pads are too big, so I stay put. Number 10 gets bowled. I'm left not out, and the story makes the paper the next day in the Western Herald or something, the Western Leader. And of course, from that point on, I say to Dad, teach me how to score my first run. And so we went to the backyard, and of course I started bowling to Jeff, and the rest is history. I mean, I had a very fiery relationship with my brother in the backyard, and that that probably set the scene really for things to come.
At the book launch, as far as I'm aware, there was only one person taking notes and writing them down, and I hid at the back and did that. So I wrote down at the book launch something you said, and I'm quoting it back to you. "I loved batting. Life was okay when I was out in the middle." Was that the place where you were best able to cope?
Yeah, on my own. I had worked out, finally, it took 20 test matches, to sort of get over my fear and to stop collapsing under that weight of fear, fear of humiliation, fear of failure, and to work out some techniques to control my mind and my concentration. And I studied sports psychology around sort of that. I was 21, 22, and I did it in the quiet because sports psychology was a bit taboo back then. But I learned about how to control my thinking, and using affirmations, visualization off the field helped to calm me out in the middle. So when I got to the middle and I took guard and I saw the first ball leave the bowler's hand, and I moved and I met the ball below my eyes and I hit the middle of the bat, I kind of knew that I was okay and that I could then go on and build an innings. And so in those days, of course, Test cricket and four-day cricket was really the go. You weren't kind of influenced too much by one-day cricket, and 2020 cricket hadn't come along. So I was really able to take my time and build an innings, and that's where I felt very much that a self-acceptance of myself. I actually quite like myself out in the middle, and I played with a style that I thought people would like.
You see, I've seen another guy who is still struggling with himself, who I know is at his happiest when he's out in the middle, and you've indicated who it is.
Left-handed Jesse.
Yeah, it has to be Jesse.
I've often thought about Jesse and me.
Different reasons, but he is so complete when he's out there. He's in charge. No one can get to him. Yep. Whereas other people look at that, people like me, and we look at all the 10 giving us a hard time who are in the field. We look at the bowler bowling and we feel under attack. But the way I've read your book, the way I heard you say that the other day, the way I have watched Ryder, that is when you guys are at your happiest. You don't feel under attack. You feel in control.
Yeah, I've thought of Jesse a lot. I really feel for where he's at, and he can't escape. It's just daily news. It's very difficult for him to find that piece where he, off the field, where he can transfer it onto the arena, and I can only wish him well. It's a difficult one.
There's a compulsory chapter in this book for any cricket lover ever to read. It is right at the end. It is entitled A Century Maker's Bible, How to Bat for 6 Hours in a Test. I disciplined myself not to go straight to that chapter and read it first. You quote two men throughout it, Don Bradman and Greg Chappell. Naturally Bradman, because he's the greatest ever, but why Greg Chappell?
Greg Chappell had the greatest influence on me of any cricketer in my career. And, of course, as a 19-year-old playing in my first Test series, I saw a complete master in action against another complete master, being Richard Hadley. And Greg Chappell was irresistible. I loved the way he walked out to bat, and he had that strong backbone, that tall presence. He had that fierce focus, and he had this beautiful style that, the on drive just... I think I was watching him rather than fielding for New Zealand. I had the best seat in the house, and I take it that was really the positive out of that series, was that I saw him at close hand. And I also, off the field in the dressing room, he gave me nice sound advice. He gave me a warmth that I didn't necessarily feel perhaps in my own dressing room. And I've been in touch with Greg Chappell every year for up until till now, and he's helped me through this illness. He's mentored me in life on life issues. He's very much into health as well, and so naturally for batting, Greg Chappell was the man I asked for opinions from, and I quoted from Don Bradman's book, The Art of Batting.
Did you play in the match at Eden Park where just after the underarm incident, and he came out to bat, and as he came out, the bloke rolled the lawn bowl out there?
It was my international debut.
I thought it was.
Yeah, 43,000
I recall this vividly by taking all my family to this game. Big chili bins that we did in those days, and all the kids with all their food inside them, and I've never, Martin, been to a cricket match in New Zealand with that atmosphere, and I've been to a lot of cricket, as you know, but that atmosphere that day was something else, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was a privilege to be in my first game.
That was your first game?
Yeah, I didn't bat. I was down at 6, but ended up falling behind Paddles and Cairnsey because they went into hit the final overs. We batted first. I think got 240 odd, and then Australia collapsed, but Greg Chappell didn't. He got 100. And I took a few wickets and some catches, but I had it all. I had this wonderful 43,000 people watching, and watching Greg Chappell get 100, and we won. So I couldn't fault the day.
Well, the chapter is entitled "A Century Maker's Bible: How to Bat for 6 Hours in a Test." Now, in this chapter, you talk about the mental state. You break it down to willpower and imagination, goal setting, visualization, concentration, relaxation, mental toughness, self-sufficiency, and self-analysis. Martin, do you believe that the mental side is inherent in some players, learned or developed?
I think that there is, say with some players, they are able to pick up an image of what they want a lot easier than someone else who might pick up an instruction or a self-talk message. So that's the will, self-talk, and visualization is obviously the imagination. And I was very much a self-talk, that's what we were taught. And I learnt, because of my fear of failing, to read about visualization and to try it. And it's not an easy thing to pull off, but I got better at it, and it was very much part of my preparation for every single test match from about test 20 onwards, and it certainly helped my record improve. And I visualized here, there, and everywhere, often when I exercised, but it could have been driving. Sometimes I sat in a dark room and did it, but it wasn't as good as when I visualized walking or even running. Somehow that sparked me into a bit of a frenzy of images, and that was powerful.
Off air, you were explaining to me about a visualisation to do with a Lord's Test match. Relate the story to our listeners. Yeah.
So what I did 3 months prior to a series is I'd visualise where I was playing and who I was playing against. When it came to 1994, I had been injured for 6 months with my knee, and Ken Rutherford had taken over the side, and I was trying to get back fit enough to tour England in 1994. And the whole motivation was I wanted to ask myself the question, have you still got it? Can you still bat? And I felt at the age of 31 that it was too early. So I went into the garage at Queenstown, where I lived in Millbrook. And my first wife, Simone, was in the lounge having a glass of wine, and I went in to do some step-ups. And I put on Michael Jackson, and the album was The Thriller. And he had that beat going, which I could step up onto a bench, just step up, step down, etc. And I started to visualise batting at Lord's, and I know Lord's well by this stage in my career, so that was easy, getting the picture, the sound, the applause, the slope, everything. And what I started to do was add in Angus Fraser, Philip de Freitas, Peter Such, and any other bowler. That Devon Malcolm was another one that I would be batting against. And for 40 minutes, I played a beautiful innings in my mind as I did step-ups. And when I reached 100, and the music stopped, I broke down and started crying in the garage. And Lorraine Simone walked in, and she wondered what was going on. And I said, she said, "Are you all right?" And I said, I'm beautiful. I just scored 100 at Lord's, and I'm just feeling the emotion that I can still bat.
She'd have looked at you as if you were a fruitcake.
She grabbed another bottle and went back to the lounge. And I, 3 months later, I batted on the first day. We won the toss and batted on the first day at Lord's, second test match. And I took my time, and I got into a nice partnership with Shane Thompson. And about 4 p.m. or whatever on that day, I hit Graham Gooch for 2 down to fine leg, and I reached my 100, and I broke down, and I cried in my own little world for about 30 seconds. And Shane Thompson came up to me, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm beautiful. I've just scored 100 at Lord's." And he said, "Well, you better get yourself sorted out, because we've got some more batting to do." And I said, "Give me 5 minutes." It was a powerful example for me, and I was able to apply that in the next test, because I was ill for 3 weeks. Following that innings, I went into a very sick state. I think I was just so drained by and exhausted by the whole process Though I was in bed for 2 or 3 weeks, I got out of bed to play at Old Trafford, and without any practice, I scored a 70 and 100. And I put that all down to just sitting in my bed and visualising the Old Trafford and the bowlers and feeling that calmness.
I advertised earlier in today that this was solely going to be about cricket, and in the hope that we would get young cricketers listening to it. So the visualisation thing, are there any tips that you can give people? Because clearly you believe that this is the difference between going from one plane to the other. As a kid, I was a dreamer and wanted to play at the top level, but I never, ever in my life was involved in visualisation. But I now know a lot of people in sport who have hit the top who do visualise. So give us a couple of tips for kids out there who are thinking, I'm going to try this.
Well, forget the word. Just settle on dreaming. Get into a dreamy state and just in your mind, quietly on your own, just dream about what you would like to do in the next match that you're going to play. And if you can, try and bring in the colour of the ground and the state of the environment you're in.
Get it real.
Get the pavilion there and the steps. And if you've played at Cornwall Park and that's where you want to score 100, then bring in the picture of Cornwall Park. And sometimes I used video or pictures just to get that kind of, detail, if you like, into my picture, my little movie that I'm playing in my mind. And then if you can bring in a bit of emotion, like, maybe the bowler's having a go at you and, you can hear the chat or, they're encouraging each other and you're just wiping it out and focusing on the ball. And then watch yourself moving at the crease, your footwork, getting in behind the ball hitting the middle of the bat. I mean, it all has to be positive. And and if you get clever, you can make it, you're up against a really good bowler and you're dealing with it. And that's all you need to do. There's no wrong or right way of doing it. It's just your way of putting yourself into that game prior to you being there.
The book is out. It's called Raw by Martin Crowe. It is in booksellers right throughout the country. The chapter that I am focusing on in particular is the final chapter, A Century Maker's Bible, How to Bat 6 Times in a Test. And there is a piece there on visualisation that I write all over books that I read, which is I've just written a fabulous page. There is one other thing. And in some things, when you read a book like this, you feel, I was ahead of my time in coaching kids. And I can remember saying to the Auckland Grammar First 11 that your brother was in, when you watch the ball, just look at it and say, this ball. And I read this. I come to page 285. Begin your concentration routine by saying, this ball. Your affirmations are in use. Soft hands, head still. And I remember Phil Hayden, who you would have played quite a bit against, played for University of Auckland, didn't he? Yeah. And he took it one stage further. Watch the ball was what he said. All those little tips that are in there that you take as second nature, I'm watching my grandsons learn those things now, and it's exciting stuff. You can't turn your back on this game, Martin. The book is out. It is called Raw. Martin Crowe is in the studio. We're focusing on the cricket elements of this book, and I accentuate the point I made in the introduction. There is a lot more to this book than just cricket. I've chosen to just look at the cricket elements, but there are all the things that you've read in the reviews as well. Martin, enough of the mental side of batting. I want to look at the technical setup. What's your basic philosophy behind that?
Well, technique has got to be a personal thing, and I've noticed in recent times, maybe the last decade or so, that there are so many coaches now around that have theories, and they are almost forcing these techniques, particularly around one-day cricket, 2020 cricket, onto young people because they have a title, and these young players are being forced to adopt them, and they are ruining their careers. I believe that a technique has to be something that you cultivate yourself, and it usually comes from a young age through your school years, and that's what you should rely on. But it is also good to get some feedback from a mentor who perhaps can just identify that you've got the basics down. So I'm big on basics, and that is head position, footwork, and pretty much that, and playing late and straight, so that you are always looking to delay your dismissal, because we tend to get ourselves out, and you delay your dismissal by basically eliminating the bowled, the LBW, and the caught modes, which are the three most common. And if you play straight, you won't be bowled or LBW. And if you hit the ball late, you won't be caught, and you will therefore stay at the crease and you can score runs. So that was my philosophy.
There are some simple things in this book that I hadn't seen outlined as bluntly. Batsmen get themselves out 9 times out of 10.
That's my belief, and that certainly applied to me, that you often, obviously, are able to survive a lot of good balls, and you can leave a lot of balls as well. But often you will find that a batsman could have played a particular ball much better and therefore survived that ball. And so I have used this philosophy, if you like, of I'm going to get myself out, but I'm going to bloody well delay it for as long as possible. And I'm going to try in the meantime to bat in 10s. And if I can bat and score 15 10s, then I've got a good score. And therefore it also takes the emotion and the comfort zone that you can sometimes reach when you reach milestones like 50 and 90 and what have you, that by batting in 10s, you're taking that away.
You quote Don Bradman. He wrote in that outstanding book of his, if a batsman can eliminate hitting the ball in the air, his chances of survival are doubled. Footwork and balance and the coordination will always remain the cornerstone of batting. It's not rocket science, is it?
No, and then he was the master at that. And you know, he talks a lot about footwork, and footwork is both feet. And a lot of players get confused that it's just one foot going forward. But in fact, you have to activate and dance at the crease by using both feet to activate the body, to get into position. And hitting the ball is the last thing you do. It's, you know, and that's what our players now are not doing. They're actually hitting the ball too early. And the body hasn't done enough work, and the feet haven't been activated enough, both feet in particular. So the bat and the hands, and we saw that at Lord's when we were bowled out for 68, the bat and the hands become dominant, and therefore it leads to their dismissal.
You mention in here, and certainly it is substantiated by everything that Greg Chappell says in this chapter as well, that you should react to the ball. Now, we see a lot of people going out and playing preconceived shots, especially in 2020. And yet that is what the three of you are saying, Bradman, Chappell and yourself, completely the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, and it's easy for me to sit here because I didn't have 2020 cricket, and I was stupid enough to invent it, I suppose. But I didn't have that problem. We had one-day cricket, but, you know, batting 50 overs is so much different to batting 20 overs. And so when you're asked to score at 10 and over, you can understand there's some premeditation, that you've got to hit the ball hard, or for 6 or for 4. But when it comes to Test cricket, that's where our guys have to be clever, and that's why they're paid well. They've got to get clever about sort of a demarcation line as to, right, that approach is gone, let's say premeditation in 2020 cricket, and for this Test series against England, I'm going to focus on just watching the ball and reacting. And what that means is trusting your instinct and your conditioning. Now, if your conditioning is good, in other words, you're practicing well and you're getting good advice or feedback, then you can trust it and you can just watch the ball and react.
When you talk about feedback, you make the major point in here that the number one coach for every batsman should be that batsman.
Yeah. Self-sufficiency has sort of gone out the window in this...
Which is ludicrous.
In this latest decade, because you have so many people that are in there justifying their jobs. And I'm not so much pointing the finger at those individuals. I just think that whoever makes those decisions that they need, and it's probably the head coach, I guess, these days, that they need 5 or 6 lieutenants around them, is to me actually detrimental to the individual's development. They'll all poo-poo that now and they'll spin it a different way, and that's fine. But to me, I think that there is a good case that self-sufficiency isn't highlighted enough these days. After all, when you're out in the middle, do you have a walkie-talkie or whatever to your batting coach as to what you do next when this guy comes on? No. You have to be able to cope with yourself. And again, I come back to that Lord's 68. Under pressure, we had no idea because we're too busy listening to everyone else come up with the answers, team meetings and what have you, instead of saying, hey, it's my role, I'll work it out. That's what self-sufficiency is.
A lot of kids, hopefully, listening. One of the highlights if you're a young cricketer is when you get your first bat. Now, how heavy should that bat be for anyone? Because you've got a rule of thumb, which is a brilliant one.
Well, it should be light, and it should be an extension of your arms. And it should be that if you're with your top hand, you can actually swing it shoulder height across your body, say a dozen times without being tired. Because you're going to have, if you want to play the hook shot after 80 overs, you've got to have a light bat to be able to do that. The other theory that I have, well, it's not a theory, I think I've proven it, that my bats were 2.6, light, very light. And that when you're playing a long innings for 6 hours, you're going to defend or not score off around 75% of those balls. That's the way it works. So why do you need a heavy bat in which to not score off a ball? Because the ball's not going anywhere. So why don't you use a light bat for 75% of your innings, and for the other 25%, if your timing's good, you're going to get runs anyway.
The converse argument that people will be saying as they're driving along today, come on, Crowe, what about Chris Gale? And these bats that guys like Gale have got are enormously heavy. Well,
I'm not talking about 2020 cricket, and I've tried to create a divide there that, there's a different technique, there's a different philosophy. I can't speak about it. I haven't played it. I'm talking about how to bat for 6 hours in a test match.
Yep.
And I would probably use a heavier bat for 2020, and I would go back to my 2.6 for a test match.
You used 2.6. Bradman used 2 pound 4 ounces, and Gary Sobers used 2 pound 6.
And I think these days, I picked up a couple of bats the other day with Mark Greatbatch, and they are amazingly well made. I mean, they are light. There are light bats with a lot of wood. And it's because they dry the bat out, and they don't last very long. Yeah. In fact, my bats, I would try and last 2 seasons if I could. But these bats seem to only last a few hours. So there is, there's plenty of light bats out there, but you've got to make sure you're picking, particularly a youngster. I'm talking about a 15-year-old. Don't go and pick up a Gale bat. Pick up a 15-year-old bat.
Now, if you doubt what Martin is saying, the great Greg Chappell is quoted in here as saying, put a heavy bat in your hands and you're literally rooted to the spot. I love it. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah. The stance.
2-footed, balanced, and the key is that your head, and particularly if you're a right-hander, that your right eye is level and looking at the ball when it's released. And I go in to talk about that often a bowler will run in, say a medium pacer, and by the time the ball is released, the batsman's right eye has drifted even an inch or two to the offside, and therefore the whole body has shifted and everything is facing mid-off and not to the bowler, and that's where you get into horrible problems.
Mums and dads listening to this program, the most useful thing that they can do for their son or daughter to help them become great at batsmanship, what is it?
Well, technically, if you put your head up against a wall and got your stance with a bit of flex in your knees, there's a natural stance, and it's very hard to lift your bat up with the wall there. That's how I learnt basically to stand. Right. I think you need to be able to have that, obviously, that self-sufficiency and belief and a dream.
I've heard this from lots of mums in particular, don't know how to help him, and particularly solo mums who want their kids to young boys to play well. Just throwdowns are the thing, aren't they? Or encouragement, equal amount of both.
Absolutely. I mean, it's affirming a very simple message over and over again. Watch the ball. Yeah. And someone throwing you the ball and hitting it late and hitting it along the ground. I mean, they're all basics, but that is the core of batting for 6 hours in a test match. If you do that repetitively and you can stick to that, then you will succeed. Obviously, you need a bit of luck in this game, but you will succeed if given the opportunity.
We're talking with Martin Crowe. His book is out. It's called Raw. It's on sale right throughout the country. It is not just a cricket book. As I said in introducing this, I've chosen to interview him solely on cricket. But it is a book which deals with his recovery from cancer. It is a lovely love story. his love for Lorraine, her love for him, Marty's depressions, television, all of that is covered in this book. This hour, we're taking one element of his life, the element that I have always envied him for, the fact that he can bat better than anyone else. So why has he been so good at it? Why is he not going to continue it? That's the bit we're going to look at in a moment. So, yep, there might be a bit of politics now that we've done a fair bit of the cricket. Martin, before we talk some people, again, back, and I'm very conscious of the influence you could have on young cricketers. If you were to give them some advice as to what they should do to give themselves the best chance of succeeding in the game, what's your best, most simple advice?
I think I'd get a mentor. I had a great coach from the age of 10. There's a guy called Harold Whitcomb at Cornwall Cricket Club. And, you know, batting is, and I'm just talking about batting as opposed to cricket, but batting can be quite scary because it's only one ball, one mistake, as Bradman would say in the book, and it's over. And so there's quite a lot of anxiety around that, and I think it's important to have someone that, whether it be your dad or your mum or your big brother or whoever it is. I had Harold Whitcomb, and he was able to look at, my footwork and my technical side of it as well as just encourage me. He had a great passion for the game. And then it became Greg Chappell a bit later. I think that's really important, and I think you need to trust them and stick with them and stick with the basics that you're learning from a young age. And so you never lose sight of who you are through your development as a cricketer. I see cricketers change their games completely from what they had when they were at school, and then they get lost. So really trust what you're learning all the way through, and that love for the game and to score runs.
In these comments that you've passed, that this is the end of your love affair with cricket, that you're moving on. Now, I personally don't believe that, and I'm not here to change your mind on that, but aren't you really saying, I can't stand any more of the politics, I can't stand any more of the ball, but when we sat and talked about how to bat over this long period of time that we've been there, you've still got that. That's still there for you. Can't you just leave all the people and blazers and things out of your life? You understand where I'm coming from?
I think it's a smart observation. I mean, I just can't separate the two, I guess, and that's why I've just got to walk away and focus on that. There's so many other things I can do in my life, particularly the love for the people around me, but also to step out and perhaps learn other things. I just don't need cricket upsetting me, and I certainly don't want to even run the risk at this stage in the near future of even considering it, given what I've been through.
But the game itself will never upset you, surely.
No, not at all.
So there is a hell of a difference, isn't there?
And the art of batting is I've got nothing but gratitude for, the fact that I was able to, throughout my life, enjoy that particular skill set. But it's just too hard to sift through. And I've said it already in the media that Lorraine said to me, a really nice thought. She said, Marty, one day you'll be watching at Cornwall Park or Auckland Grammar and you'll wander by and you'll see a young boy batting and you'll fall back in love with it and you'll want to help someone and you'll mentor. And I'm pretty sure that'll happen. But it's like I just can't drink at the moment from cricket. It's just too hard. I won't watch them because my analytical mind or my ego mind will just start ripping into it again, and that will leave me lying awake at night, and that's what I'm really working hard at shutting down. I mean, I'm getting a lot of help on that to shut it all out because it is having an effect on my health. And now that I've got through chemotherapy and I'm in remission, I really need to,
look after yourself.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do?
Well, this book gives me a chance to speak briefly about my experiences and the story and the lessons, and lessons aren't any good unless you share them. So I'm learning to share, and I'm going to take a bit of a break. I'm going off to see my brother Jeff in July with my daughter Emma, who's 10, and it's her birthday present to go to Disney World. Jeff lives in Florida, and spend some quality time with my bro, because a lot of my counselling has been about him. And when I come back, I will be open to speak, and I hope that I can help groups, whether it be 14-year-olds at Grammar or Sacred Heart or wherever it might be, to talk about lymphoma, to talk about cancer, to talk about healing.
And it'll be much more effective if you've got a bat in your hand, because they'll listen more. Don't ever
Give it up,
think
Biggs. Give it up.
I will not give up on it. It'll happen in time.
These are the last 7 minutes I'm talking on cricket.
You're not getting 7 because we're behind with commercials.
Don't waste them.
Back to wrap up with them right after this.